Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It is March of 2020, and if you're like me, you might have a lot of extra time at home over the next couple weeks. So I'm going to be doing a few retro reviews of models that have been out for a while to kind of let people take a look at them if they haven't seen them and get an idea of what they can do on some of their builds if they, like me, are stuck at home for a little bit. Today we are going to be looking at a real classic. This kit has been out in some iteration for about 17 years. It is the 1/1000th TOS Enterprise, the original series Enterprise. This edition came out in about 2013. This is the Space Seed edition, and it comes with the Botany Bay as a nice little add-on. This is a pretty nice kit, and I picked this one up about a week ago for about $14 using a coupon at Michael's Hobby Shop. So they are pretty plentiful out there, and this is a kit that is well worth the money. So to really understand why the 2003 Enterprise model kit is so good, we kind of have to go back to the beginning when the show first premiered and AMT started making model kits of the USS Enterprise. They built a model kit that was about 18 inches long, and it was pretty accurate for the time, but they kind of kept re-releasing it with minor changes for 30 plus years. And if you kind of look at it, a couple of the boxes here, this is what it would look like if you did a really good job on it. Quite often, you'd have trouble with the pylons, with them kind of drooping or breaking or not having great connections. The parts weren't always that accurate. If you look at that bridge dome there, it's not very accurate at all. Now, for this, I'm going to be using a couple images from the culttvman.com website. There's a wonderful article there, A History of the AMT Enterprise Model by Jade Shaldick. So if you really want to learn about those old models, go to that website and read this article. It is wonderful. But you can kind of see they would make changes throughout the run to get things to be more and more accurate. But it still never really reached the level of accuracy that we would want these days. So here's a couple different kinds of sensor dishes that came in it. The sensor dish mounts. This was probably the hardest part about those old kits. This is the various ways that those old pylons would attach to the ship. Some had a little hook system that kind of looped around a part inside. Some just had tabs. Some had bigger tabs. The Bassard collectors had a couple different iterations in there, but none of them are really up to where the 1/1000th is, because they were just kind of either a single transparent piece or solid opaque pieces. The decals originally provided just the name and registry and a couple of the stripes. A little bit later, they realized that they could sell more kits if they gave you a couple different naming choices. But almost always, when you ended up trying to build one of these, if you wanted it to be really accurate, you would have to go searching for third-party parts. This is a screenshot of DLM Parts, who used to offer parts to accurize some of these old model kits. And you can see here, he would offer different versions of the bridge and the upper decks, so you could try and get an accurate model. So this was a model that got released in the late 90s. This was a 22-inch version of the USS Enterprise, and it was a cutaway, so you could kind of see the decks and everything inside. Now, they would release this kind of with both halves. You could put them together so that you could have a complete model. And a lot of people spend a lot of time filling those seams and trying to make it look like a single model, because it was so much better than the old 18-inch version. But even with that, you would end up having to buy more parts. Different intercooler fins, different end caps for the nacelles, a bridge dome that wasn't cut in half by that cutaway line. And at this time, people started really becoming a little bit more demanding, and they didn't want to just make the version of the ship from the show. There would be parts where you could make it as it was seen in the pilot of the Cage, or you could buy parts to make it as it was in the first pilot with William Shatner. You could buy parts to make it look like it was in the episode Where No Man Has Gone Before. And if you go forward into the future to just the past couple of years, you'll see a version put out by Revell that really isn't accurate at all. You can see it's got crazy grid lines all over the hull, across the neck. You've got grid lines across the pylons. And then you've got this crazy curve for the lower saucer deck that really doesn't match anything except maybe the animated series. So you can see there have been a lot of model kits of the TOS Enterprise, and none of them have really been accurate out of the box, been something you could complete without buying a lot of add-ons to make a good version of it. Now, all of that brings us back to this version of the model kit. Originally released in 2003, updated in 2013 to add that Botany Bay. This is a model that pulls off everything. It is the first completely accurate version of the USS Enterprise that can be built out of the box with completely accurate parts. Now, please, I'm sure someone out there has found things that are inaccurate with this. Go ahead and throw it down in the comments if you want to let us know. As far as I know, this is incredibly accurate. Let's take a look at the back here. Got pictures of the ship. All right. This model kit celebrates the classic Star Trek episode by offering the USS Enterprise along with the SS Botany Bay for the first time. Optional parts are included to build the Enterprise in one of the 3 configurations. Marking decals, pictorial assembly guide, and dome base are all included. Okay, so right there, what it's telling us is in this box, you get all the parts to make it on those 2 pilot versions. The original Cage version, the version from Where No Man Has Gone Before, and the version seen in all of the episodes after that. So this lets you build it in all 3 of those without having to build or buy extra parts. When we look at the decal sets, you'll see we even have some other options. All right, here are the decal sheets. Now, once again, they have provided different names for the ship, so you can build it as all the versions that were seen in the original show. You can also build this to match any of those 3 production models, the 2 pilot versions or the one made in the show. And the difference there is the original one only had black windows. So you'll see some of these have all black windows, and some of them have a combination of white and black windows. So you can see right here, here is a decal for the series production, and this is the same decal done only with black windows for the pilot version. You can also see 42 and 48A here are for different versions of it. And you get to do some mirror universe versions as well, since they provide you with those emblems from the, I believe it's called the Empire in the mirror universe. So really a fantastic set of decals that for the first time included all of the windows to make your model accurate. The instructions for this sheet are very clear, and they break it down into a couple different sections to show you how you can do it for the production version, how you can do it if you want to do the first pilot and second pilot versions. And the decal callouts are on the back, and they will do the same thing. They will break it down how to do it for the production version, first pilot version, second pilot version, and the Mirror Universe Enterprise. A fantastic job there to really make that decal placement very clear. Now, if you're looking at the plastic, the first thing that jumps out at you is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nacelle halves. So that gives you, if you do the math there, 4 nacelles. So they give you a pair of nacelles to match the production version of the Enterprise, and then a separate pair of nacelles that will match the pilot version. And then you'll see they provide you with really 3 different types of rear end caps. You can get the version with the holes, the version with the strip, or the version that gets the 2 white balls sticking out the back. So you get lots of choices there. You can see for the shuttle bay, you get the version without lines from the original pilot or the version with lines from the production series. You can see you get 2 different versions of the sensor dish for the 2 different sizes. They really went out of their way to make sure they were providing all the versions for this ship. Now, if we go back to those nacelle caps that we looked at from those old ones, they were always one piece. This actually gives you 2 parts. It gives you an interior part that you can paint one color, then you get an outside part that you can paint another. This really lets you do some really cool effects. And once again, you get enough to do 4 different nacelles. So when you're done building this model kit, you actually end up with 2 complete extra nacelles that you can use on future kit bashing projects. You get a lot of extra decals too. So it really gives you some opportunities to add some things to your kit box for future kit bashing. Now this is supposed to be a snap kit, and it fits together very, very well. They've put a lot of thought into the engineering of this ship. The biggest problem in those old kits was really the pylons drooping, and they have a pretty good approach to fixing that in this version. So the first thing that really gets done to prevent the drooping is the pylons have 2 halves that end up snapping together for strength. You can see there is just a pin and a hole here on the bottom to hold those together, and a pin and a hole up on top to fit those together. All right, so that is snapped together. Once those 2 are put together, they and some of the other parts that I haven't put in yet actually need to be trapped between the 2 halves of the engineering hull. Now, it looks like I might have to trim a pin down in there to get those to fit together. But it's at this point in the build where you start to realize this is going to be more complicated than a normal snap kit. Now, the reason this is more complicated than snap kit is because the original TOS Enterprise is smooth. It does not have seams down the spine. It does not have breaks here where you see those parts meet. It does not have a seam running across the front of this nacelle pylon. It needs to be smooth. This bottom, it should not have a seam here. It should not have a seam here. And that means on this kit, you're going to have to break out the putty. You're going to need to putty this seam. You're going to need to putty these 2 seams right here. And same thing on the nacelles. This needs to be smooth. You need to get a smooth seam across the top. And you can see on this version, I did not do as well as I should. You can still see a bit of the seam there. And you can see, even though I did putty and sand quite a bit, you can still see kind of that bump where the 2 parts meet. And now that I've pointed that out, you guys probably won't be able to not see it. And you can really see how, even with a little bit of putty and sanding, there's still more work that I should have done on that to get it completely smooth. On the top of the nacelle, you'll be able to see kind of right here, you'll see that tiny bit of the seam. And a little bit more breaking out there. But if we're not zoomed in as close to that, you see that the top of the nacelle looks pretty darn good. In fact, if we zoom out a little bit here, even that bump where the pylons meet isn't too bad. But certainly you will not be just snapping this together and painting it. You will have to do putty and seam work to get this looking good. And that's different than a lot of the other snap kits. This USS Enterprise, no putty, no sanding. In fact, on this one, there's not even any glue. But all of the seams were just done in places that would make them really be hidden. So this part gets hidden right here where there's a seam. There's a seam right here where that color changes, and there's a seam right here. And they all fit naturally along those panel lines, which means they're awfully well hidden. But there are no panel lines here to kind of hide anything or hide any of the joints. So you'll just have to break out the putty, break out the sandpaper, and get to work on it. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you actually get enough parts here to build 4 nacelles. We're going to kind of take a look at those right now and how they build up. Now, first, there will be just little bits you end up having to clean off, just little bits of flash. So a good pair of file is good for that. And same thing on the clear parts. Look for those little nubs that need to be filed down. All right, once you've got your parts cleaned up, this inner part of the dome is going to fit right in the side of that half. And then line up your pegs and your holes. You're just going to snap these 2 parts together to hold that in place. All right. Now we're going to lay just a little bit of glue down that seam. And just really a drop will do it. And then it'll actually just be wicked inside those seams. All right, I'll squeeze it together a little bit. That glue will just melt it together. If you kind of take a look there, you'll be even able to see little beads of melted plastic kind of being squeezed up. That's going to be a great seam. And we'll just be able to sand that down in a little bit. Same thing on the bottom. Now, the next thing that'll need to be done is just masking off that clear part so that we can start laying down some of the base coat on the nacelle. Now this is the part we could also step aside, take a day or so to really work on those seams. But just for this review video, I'm just going to paint it as is. Unfortunately, we'll still have those seams there, but I'm just kind of showing you how this one goes together. All right, we'll be giving these a couple different coats, kind of giving it several hours in between and flipping it over to get the other sides. But that's what we're doing now, is just base coats over all 4 nacelles. We're just going to start masking off those front rings so we can airbrush those. And we're going to be airbrushing just these back end caps. The last little bit I'm airbrushing here are the little white balls that kind of fit at the end of the nacelles. Now the fun part about doing the TOS Enterprise is your model will almost always end up looking different than other people's. With the refit, that's not really the case. Almost everybody's going to paint it white. Most everybody's going to use black on these inner parts. And everybody's going to have a model that looks mostly like this. On the TOS, you have a lot more choices as far as colors and ways to go. And earlier I mentioned that the nacelle collectors have two different clear parts, an inner clear part and an outer clear part. And the way you paint those two can really change how it looks. If you're doing a first pilot version, I believe it is just a solid red without any clear parts. So you'll end up with something like that. One of the ways that I really like is I like doing a silver inside underneath a very lightly tinted clear red. And that just kind of gives you an impression that there's more than just a dome there. That's kind of what I did on my completed model back there. But I have also seen people do kind of a yellow and other bright colors underneath. And that could be a pretty good effect. You'll be able to catch that yellow sometimes depending on where you look at it. And it presents more of an orange, which fits more kind of the later TV shows a little bit better. Then you can also just do solid colors underneath a clear part. After you've snapped on the front, this back part will simply snap on the back. Or if you're doing a version with one of the balls, you're going to push the ball in from behind. Once you push that in from behind, it will snap on the back just like the other. Oh, lots of other additions to the nacelles. You'll have to put on about 3 different intercooler fins on each one. And then you'll have a lot of detail painting, like these squares here, the fins, the grills back here should be painted, and then a lot of decaling. But once again, a lot of different choices for how you can kind of work those nacelles to really make the ship your own. The saucer layout is pretty simple. And once again, they give you 2 different clear pieces to fit in the lower sensor dish. They give you 2 different bridges to fit in here. They give you 2 different fins here towards the impulse engine and a single impulse engine. The entire idea being those combination of parts can make accurate versions of this model. You get a couple clear pieces. This is kind of a unique piece. So this will fit up into the saucer and have a post that fits down into the lower saucer. And that's going to give you your navigation beacons for the Enterprise. You can see that clear part on top and on bottom. And here's kind of the parts breakdown. You've already seen the 2 halves here fit together. You have a deflector dish housing. The deflector dish itself comes in 2 different sizes for the different versions. The 2 parts for the shuttle bay and the little needle that sticks out the front of the saucer. Now they do sell this as a snap kit, and you're supposed to be able to just insert the nacelle on like that and roll it until it locks into place. And that works fairly well on the port nacelle. But it does not work on the starboard nacelle. Most of the builds I've done or the builds I've seen other people do, this part simply does not work as well. So there's a lot of trimming to be done on the inside to really get that part to fit. So all versions of this kit have been pretty good, but I really do appreciate that when they re-released it in 2013, they added value to this kit. They added in the SS Botany Bay as an add-on for us. So instead of just kind of re-releasing and changing the box art, they went out of their way to give us an extra little build. And if we look once again at my built and completed part, they gave us an extra part to the stand to kind of have it fly along next to the USS Enterprise. When I look at the most recent build I did of the USS Enterprise refit, I really feel comfortable saying this is the way it can look for you out of the box if you snap it together, do some basic painting, and decaling it. If you just snap together the TOS Enterprise, do some basic painting and decaling it, I don't know how happy you'll be. I think that you really will have to putty it, sand it, work real well to get things as smooth as you can. There's a lot of detail on it that really needs to stand on its own, and it needs a really good finish. If you are an average model builder, fairly comfortable with painting, sanding, putty work, gluing things, clamping things, I feel this is a good example of what the ship can look like with average skills. I think if you're average at putty and finishing, this is what it can look like. But I do think that you will need that extra level of skills to get to a point where you're happy with it. I'm pretty happy with this one. It's not my favorite rendition of the Enterprise, which is why I've only ever done the 1/1000th, and I've never gone bigger on it. I've never tried to light it. I feel it's an essential model for everybody to have. I feel everybody should have a TOS Enterprise. If you can get this one for $14 like I can, it's a good one to have. Just to say you've built the classic Enterprise. I think the SS Botany Bay is a great addition to it. So going back to the year 2003, after all of those model kits with good intentions but poorly fitting parts, drooping nacelles, modelers having to go out and buy aftermarket parts to get a accurate ship, they had quite a challenge in front of them, and I think they hit the mark. The only downfall is this is a slightly smaller kit. It's 11 inches when all those old ones were 18 or 20 inches. But we finally got an accurate, well-decaled, well-fitting ship that modelers could easily build. To me, this is one of the essential ships you should have if you build Star Trek models. I don't think everybody should go out and buy the big 350th version of the TOS Enterprise, but I think you've got to build a TOS Enterprise sometime in your Star Trek model building career. It's just classic, and it is one that will test you a little bit more on sanding and putty and giving your model a good finish. But I think if you are an average model builder who's comfortable putting a little bit of that work into it, you'll be able to make a good looking ship. And if you can get one of these, like I did, using one of the coupons hobby shops will often have, you can easily get this for under $20. So those are my thoughts on the 1/1000th USS Enterprise. We'll probably do a handful more videos over the next 2 weeks, as most of us are going to be home from work, doing our part to flatten the curve and do some social distancing. I'd love to hear your comments down below about the TOS Enterprise. I'd love to hear your ideas of other videos we can do over the next couple weeks. And overall, everybody out there, stay healthy, stay safe, take care of your communities, and thank you for following our channel.